We are going to start with the presentation entitled People Without Borders, which deals with the theme that has been discussed in the different seminars this week. First of all, I am going to introduce the presenter to you. His name is Brother Joel McGraw. He lives in Memphis, but as he retired last year after teaching for 52 years, now he's in a sabbatical year in Chicago, and he resides in the provincialate community of Westmount, Illinois. He audits courses at Catholic Theological Union of Chicago and receives spiritual direction there. He entered the Brothers of the Christian Schools on June 22nd, 1964. He got his first practice as a teacher in 1967. He made his final vows in 1971, and he has academic degrees in theology, philosophy, English, and he obtained a master's in education in 1986. He also obtained an honorary doctorate at Christian Brothers University in Memphis in 2002. Among his honors, we can mention TBHS Hall of Fame, January of 1986, Unico Service Award, October 2008, Diversity Memphis Award, June of 2010, Ave Maria Home Honoree, September of 2010, Martyrs of Memphis Award, February 2012, Italian Winterfest Guest of Honor, January 2014, St. Martin's de Porres Award at St. Peter's Catholic Church in 2019, North Star Award, Boy Scouts of America, October 2020. Among his hobbies, he likes listening to music, archives, and walking. I've had the great privilege of having met him since 2014, and I can say that this brother, Brother Joel, is very well known and loved in Memphis. I can assure you that Brother Joel will explain in detail to us many aspects of the American culture. I hope you enjoyed the lecture, and so let's get started, and welcome, my dear brother.
Acordémonos que estamos en la presencia de Dios, en el nombre
Adoremos.
del Padre y del Hijo y del Espíritu Santo. Amen. It is an honor and a privilege to participate with you this evening as we discuss the rather large topic of the world today and our hopes for unity, our hopes that the borders, the barriers between us will disappear and we will live someday the reality of a global village wherein we can celebrate both our unity and our diversity. We can live our unique cultures and at the same time respect and participate in the cultures of the diverse people that make up our planet. And I wish to thank your faculty member, Patricia Lopez, who invited me to join you this evening in this very significant moment in the life of the university. Perhaps some of you in years past participated in the spring and summer exchange program between Colegio de La Salle and Christian Brothers High School and St. Agnes Academy in Memphis, Tennessee. I had the privilege of meeting Patricia and her colleague and friend Ivania Rojas and working with them when they led groups of students to Memphis. I had the double privilege to visit Colegio de La Salle and your university a few summers ago with my novitiate classmate, Brother Peter Hannon. Both of us marveled at the welcome we received from the brothers and the lay colleagues and students during our week-long visit. We both marveled at the mastery of English that students and faculty alike possessed, and you were very patient with our limited use of Spanish. It was an important note to me that you have far outrun in Costa Rica the United States in your using and learning a second language. It made me think long and hard about my own isolation in my own country and my limited interest in the language and culture of another nation. That experience in your homeland of Costa Rica served as a big crack in the border wall of my own consciousness in which I have lived most of my life. And so again, thank you, Patricia, for helping to open my own borders and for inviting me to speak with all of you gathered tonight on this important topic of people without borders. I wish to make 5 points with you. First, I wish to acquaint you further with the ULaSalle Christian Brothers, a member of which I have now been, as Patricia said, for 57 years. In recent years, our former Superior General, Brother Alvaro Rodriguez Echeverria, was your president of the university. The founder of our institute and namesake of your university, St. John Baptist ULaSalle. He lived in France from 1651 to 1719. He was a priest, and by acts of divine providence, he got involved in establishing schools for poor boys, first in Reims, France, and then in villages like Rouen, and eventually in cities like Paris. The men who joined him in this effort were the first teachers of those boys in what came to be parish schools, parochial schools. Their association was to be as brothers to these boys, not fathers, not masters. When the question arose to ordain as priests some of these men, the first one headed in that direction, Brother Henri Leroux, died shortly before he was to be ordained. And ULaSalle saw that as a sign from God that the congregation was to remain as it is today, brothers of the Christian schools, not priests and brothers of the Christian schools. And every time the question of ordaining some of the brothers as priests arises, it is put down as a step foreign to the core of the Institute. The Institute numbered about 100 brothers at the time of the death of ULaSalle in 1719. It began to grow in numbers until the French Revolution in the 1780s, which almost destroyed the Institute, but for some brothers who fled to other countries and a few who remained in France and kept alive the spirit of ULaSalle. One brother, Solomon Leclerc, is a saint of the Catholic Church today due to his perseverance and martyrdom during the Revolution. One good thing about the Revolution was that it was the beginning of the spread of the work of the brothers to other countries. More than a century later, in the year 1904, the French government suppressed parochial schools and took over their operation and their properties. The brothers numbered about 10,000 in France alone that year, and the Combes laws reduced drastically that number. Again, several brothers who wished to persevere in their vocation fled to other countries, as far as Egypt, as far as the United States, where the Institute had been established in the mid-1800s. In a sense, we were forced by history to become brothers without borders, and it resulted in our presence today in 82 countries, like Costa Rica and like the United States. Just as my experience in Costa Rica expanded my own borders a few summers ago, and my appreciation of your culture, your language, the work of the brothers there for many years, I have had a more recent experience of my own borders being expanded. Some of you may have met Brother Matthew Kotek, a ULaSalle brother at Christian Brothers High School in Memphis, who accompanied the first band of Memphis students to Colegio ULaSalle about 6 summers ago. He is skilled in Spanish and is a teacher of that subject. His 4 weeks in your school and country awakened in him a sense of the universal character of our institute and his mission in it. Today, he is at our school in Cairo, Egypt, to get his visa to Lebanon renewed, working with the teachers at our College de Saint Joseph while there. His mission in Lebanon is being a part of the Fratelli Project, south of Beirut, Lebanon, where the brothers have a school with the Marist brothers, and the children of Syrian refugees are taught and nurtured there during the days and are transported back each evening to the refugee camps. Brother Matthew's knowledge and use of Spanish, French, English, and eventually of Arabic is enabling him to serve God and the needs of the Institute over 7,000 miles from his native state of Wisconsin. His experience and sharing it with me via phone on a regular basis has quickened in me an interest in the life of the Middle East and a concern as well for the welfare of poor children in a land so far away and so foreign to me. In a sense, it is no longer foreign. It is part of me now. I feel I'm a richer person and a person more sincere in his faith and belief in God because I am released even more from the borders of my world, which for the past 52 years was teaching in secondary school in a brother's institution. My vocation as a brother is more expanded now because in part the experience I was privileged to have with you in Colegio and Universidad de La Salle, and now in my connection with Brother Matthew in both Cairo and in Beirut. Many years ago, a brother from Spain lived in our community in Memphis, and he studied in a local university. I would ask him questions like, do you do this in Spain? Or does Spain have this also? And the like. After getting exasperated with these questions, one day he loudly proclaimed to me, "You are the most provincial brother I've ever met in my life." Meaning, closed to everything outside of his area. He was correct. I do hope now that I am losing some of that provincial character and adopted more to a universal character, a character that is not bordered so tightly. So again, thank you, dear persons of Universidad de La Salle, and thank you, dear Matthew. Second, some history of the Americas. People who came to the shores of our continent beginning in the late 1400s came to explore, for adventure, for mining natural resources of our continent, for freedom from oppression, for freedom to practice their faith, for land of their own. And with them came people of faith to evangelize and spread the gospel. These 8 motives to come to this continent were good. But yet, knowing humanity as we do, these 8 motives were tainted with human fault. Africans were brought to these shores starting in the 1600s against their will. Spanish conquistadors brought domination and cruelty. English, French, and Dutch settlers brought a lust for property and natural resources, and a form of tyranny from their own countries. Tyranny in the form of misguided efforts by Christians to evangelize the Native Americans arrived on these shores. Disease was brought to these shores. Protestant intolerance of other faiths was brought to these shores. Native Americans were driven off their lands, slaughtered, and placed on reservations, oftentimes on land that was infertile and barren of wildlife. Africans brought in chains were enslaved to do farm work, housework, and construction work, and remained that way until 1865. General Maddox, a former cabinet member in Washington, has said that slavery is our country's original sin. The Capitol building in Washington, D.C., symbolizing freedom, was built by African slaves. Their emancipation in 1863 did not result in complete freedom. And in 2021, that freedom is still far from complete. Discrimination in housing, labor, education, and healthcare remains alive and well in the United States. Women in the United States did not have the right to vote until 1920. Child labor was rampant until the beginning of the 20th century. Immigrants from Europe lived in squalor in large cities. Chinese laborers who came to build the railroads across the continent from the West lived in squalor and worked for subhuman wages. Migrants from south of the border came to harvest North American crops, and they lived in squalor and worked for subhuman wages. The famous photograph that you may have seen before in Utah of the Western and Eastern Union of the Rails included no Chinese laborers, but only white railroad workers and officials. Irish, Russian, and Italian immigrants suffered discrimination in housing and in labor the first 100 years of their move to North America. It was a common thing to see signs at places of labor. Irish need not apply. Yes, the Latin phrase e pluribus unum applies to our country, one from many. In the midst of so much suffering, a great nation was built. Enormous scientific and technological progress was made. 2 world wars were fought, and tyranny overseas was conquered. Freedom for many citizens was acquired. Great humanitarian aid in all forms has been provided by the United States to countries all over the planet. The nation has had its successes. But what borders remain in the United States today? Third, what are those borders? It appears today in the United States that we are going through a birthing process that is both painful and resulting in new life coming forth. We have witnessed an historic presidential election where cries of unfair voting and counting of ballots rang all over the country. From all accounts, it was the most secure election in the nation's history. And states where the ballots counted that were considered flawed, hand counting of the ballots took place, and the results were certified by the states. Numerous court challenges, about 60 in number, were issued and were all tossed out by the judiciary as being without merit. Joe Biden was elected president. The day the Senate gathered to certify his election, in the Capitol on January 6, his predecessor, Donald Trump, roused a crowd of his supporters blocks away from the Capitol, and in view of it, to march to the Capitol to protest what he felt was an unfair election that he thought that he erroneously had won by a landslide. And we know what took place within minutes of that speech. The Capitol was stormed by the protesters, its sacred precincts violated, and a total of 5 persons eventually died in those terrible 50 minutes of its invasion. Since that time, continuous rumblings of future violence are heard, and all Capitol buildings in all 50 states are now under constant guard. So much of the protest comes from the rural areas of the country where educational opportunities are sparse and people learn only from the media about their politics and their nation, not from reading, not from study. So many of our Catholic rural parochial schools have closed over the past 50 years, schools that in the past educated in a very good way the rural populations. Fourth, it is my view that the border still present in the United States is the border between truth and falsehood. The truth has been assaulted in our country for 4 years, and the border between citizens is as high as the walls that run along parts of the United States-Mexico territory. The birthing of truth in our country is painful. In the gospel, Jesus defines Satan as the father of lies. Jesus says that Satan lies because that is Satan's nature. In effect, when I speak a lie, I am held in the spirit of Satan. When, for example, a group of 4 friends is very closely knit, if just one of the 4 lies to the others, the close bond between them is ruptured. It is broken. Little by little, the 4 friends begin to distrust one another, and the friendship is ruined. It is ruined by evil, the evil of lying. Shakespeare's tragedy of Othello has the villain Iago lie to Othello about Othello's wife, Desdemona. Iago is so angry with Othello for Othello not making Iago his captain, but rather the young and less experienced Cassio, that Iago vows revenge to get even with Othello. How does he do it? He sows a delicate lie in the heart of Othello that his wife is committing adultery with his captain, Cassio. Little by little, Othello believes the lie and ends the play strangling his beloved Desdemona to death. Why? Because of a lie. A lie erects a border between us. It strangles the life out of people who should be in love with one another, who should respect one another. The United States continues today in the birth pains of truth versus fiction. We have a significant element of persons who believe that there are forces at work that are aimed at bringing down our country. Fascism, which promotes the idea that people are living in distinct lines of social importance, is believed to be on the march in this country. Antifa is an acronym for anti-fascism from post-World War II, and groups supporting this theory are convinced that movements in the government are in the business of turning the country into a socialist state wherein private enterprise is shut down, and the government runs the lives of persons from cradle to grave. Another theory of conspiracy that is alive in the United States is called QAnon. Anonymous groups with unsupported theories suggesting subversive groups attempting to bring down the country. QAnon asserted that a popular newscaster in the United States drank the blood of murdered infants, and this preposterous theory is believed by many persons. This entire network of false beliefs by a strong minority in the country is confronting truth. And when significant numbers of persons believe sincerely in untruths, the truth is challenged and gets on the defensive. A majority of persons may believe sincerely in an untruth, but that does not in any way change the truth. It takes strength of character to continue to believe in the truth when the truth is surrounded by falsehood. In Spanish, diablo is associated with the devil, with Satan. In Greek, diabolos means accused falsely. When truth is accused falsely by untruth, our lives become intolerable. In a sense, we experience a kind of hell wherein we live in the satanic world of the lie. When we do not believe one another, we cannot love one another. Again, the United States is in a painful birthing of truth, assaulted by untruth. We have lost our basic trust of one another. Our country is in the birth process, painful as it is, of giving a just minimum wage to workers. The elected leaders are working for this goal. Those who lost the election oppose it. Why? Raising the minimum wage takes money from the pockets of the wealthy who do not wish to share their privilege. Our country's elected government today is putting women, persons of color, persons of same-sex orientation, persons with handicaps, persons from other countries into positions of political and economic power in numbers never known before in the United States. Those who lost the election often oppose these appointments. Why? Filling the positions of power in our country with persons who reflect the diverse character of the country takes from those who lost the election the supremacy that they once held. They do not wish to share their privilege. They prefer the borders of power. Our country is in the birth process, as painful as it is for those who do not want to share their privilege, of facing the racial border that has plagued it since its founding. The inordinate number of killings of Black people in our country by law enforcement officers has brought forth an enormous protest to this country that was even unknown in the 1960s, the era of civil rights. The unfinished business and chasm of equality in nutrition, housing, education, and employment is being addressed now, and it, like birth, is painful. Our hope is that, like birth, addressing these problems now in every state of the Union will result in new life, just as birth results in new life. Our country is in the birth process, painful as it is for those who do not want to share their privilege of facing the reality that women are equal to men, that sexual orientation is not a choice, but a state determined at conception, and therefore a matter that does not make a person rank above or below any other person. that every person has a right to nutrition, decent housing, 12 years of minimum of formal education, and health care from cradle to grave, regardless of merit. These are rights. They are not privileges for a few. Each of these rights is being addressed today in our country by the government, and each of these rights is being challenged by those who lost the election. Why? Because these rights being fulfilled result in the equality of all people, and the United States has a significant number of persons, citizens, who resent such equality. Again, supremacy is high on their list of values. Supremacy is a border that our country is facing today, and the process of birth to result in the new life of equality is painful. Our country is in the birth process, painful as it is, for those who do not want to share their privilege of providing health care to its citizens, from prenatal care to the end-of-life care. The Affordable Health Care Act, passed by Congress in the presidency of Barack Obama, has been the most successful effort in the history of our country to provide medical insurance for persons of all economic levels. Persons who have never had medical coverage now, many have basic insurance to pay for their visits to clinics, to hospitals, and to pay for medicine. Yet the Affordable Health Care Act, the AHA, has been assaulted its entire history by Republican lawmakers as unconstitutional. The cry of socialist health care is raised, just as it was raised in the 1930s when Social Security came into existence in the United States. It is the same cry that was raised in the 1960s when Medicare came into existence. And today, those two programs are absolutely vital to the livelihood of the senior citizens today who in their childhoods heard the clamors against those two programs because they were felt to be socialist. And here again, the attack on the healthcare program is made by persons who have adequate health care, and the attack is made on persons who do not have any health care. The country is in the throes of birth of the health of all of its citizens. It is the classic conflict between the haves and the have-nots. Under the battle flag of our former president, a frontal assault on the Affordable Health Care Act, known by the derogatory term Obamacare, has been waged constantly to eradicate the program and throw once again millions of American citizens into a state of no health care coverage. The result of such an effort can well result in the birth of a stillborn child rather than a living, thriving human being. Our country is in the birth process, painful as it is for those who do not want to share their privilege of providing food security to persons from the prenatal time to the end of lifetime. Again, this is a right. It is not a privilege. Millions of Americans today have what has come to be known as food insecurity in a land that produces food in great abundance, even during the pandemic of COVID-19. And again, the haves oppose funding for that food to be distributed free of charge to our starving citizens. This will be yet another weight on our budget deficit, they say. This is yet another conflict in our country between the truth and falsehood. And there are believers in our country on both sides. Our country is in the birth process, painful as it is for those who do not want to share their privilege of respecting life for persons from the womb to the tomb, as the saying goes. The abortion of millions of children each year in the United States is an evil of historic horror. And we know that the word evil is such a word that when spelled in reverse is live. Significant numbers of persons support the practice of abortion in the United States, and significant numbers of persons oppose the practice of abortion. Our Catholic Church opposes abortion. I understand that this same debate exists in Costa Rica. It is a debate around the entire planet. The fact that millions of children are aborted around the entire planet every year for scores of reasons does not change the reality that murdering children in the wombs of their mothers never is on the side of truth and is always on the side of falsehood. And coexisting with this fact is the fact that illegalizing abortion does not rid the planet of this murder. And it also brings back to the fore the danger of botched abortions, which result so often in the deaths or permanent injuries to the mothers. The moral principle of the end does not justify the means comes to center stage here. The church teaches throughout the ages that I may not do something evil in order to secure something good. The atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the Pacific theater of World War II is the classic example used when debating the moral principle. Does the end ever justify the means? We are in a birth process of debating this important principle in our countries. And in the tug of war that's taking place, there are many persons tugging on both sides, each with their own reasons for supporting or opposing the practice of abortion. The pro-life movement in our country has been appropriated, taken into the camp of persons who oppose abortion and support life in the womb. But at the same time, many of those persons oppose measures to make life better for persons after life in the womb. They support anti-life stances such as the practice of capital punishment, the abrogation of the Affordable Health Care Act, the reduction of food assistance, the provision of affordable housing as too expensive for the country. And yet they trumpet their position as pro-life. Life is supported by them in the womb, and support is abandoned after the womb in the frame of mind of such persons. Our country and our church is in the birth process, painful as it is, of respecting same-sex unions, both inside and outside of marriage. Such unions are now legal in the United States. A Supreme Court's decision ruling during the Obama administration. And yet the legality of the relationships does not end the debate by the church and society of the normality of these relationships. The pains of debating and accepting this new norm of human love and union are great in the birth process, in families and in societies and religious denominations in our country. COVID-19 has challenged our practice of our faith because in large part, gathering with our parishes and communities is prohibited to discourage the spread of the virus. I myself here in the Diocese of Joliet, because I'm over the age of 60, am not permitted to attend the liturgy because of health concerns. But with time, numbers of persons have grown discouraged by watching television masses and services. They become bored with these presentations and long for in-person worship and prayer. Preparation for baptism, reception of other sacraments, celebration of marriages and funerals have all been curtailed drastically in the past year. Personal practice of the faith has taken center stage, and in many cases, it has resulted in the deepening of personal faith. A great question exists in this country and perhaps in Costa Rica. After the pandemic has been slowed, will people return once again to their parishes and places of worship after a year of being away? Again, it is our hope that the painful birth process of our faith in the pandemic will result in a live birth of a renewed faith and practice of it. And like every other nation on earth today, it is painful. Our country is in the birth process of fending off the deadly effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is roughly a year old this month in our hemisphere. It has killed over 450,000 persons in the United States alone. It has devastated our economic life in this country for millions of persons by stalling their employment or completely wiping away their employment. It has in a significant way erased a year of education for students from childhood to adulthood in this country. It has isolated the population to such an extent that in the United States, mental depression and consequent suicide is at pandemic levels. It has crippled transportation. Commercial real estate of emptied office space is in crisis. The delivery of the miraculously produced vaccine is stalled or slowed dramatically across the United States. The birth of a healthy citizenry is slow, and in many cases, it is resulting in stillbirth due to this horrific disease. And it is important to note that in the country of its origin, the deadly nature of the disease was hidden from the planet for months, and persons from that country were allowed to travel around the globe in planes and unwittingly spread the disease. That hiding of the truth was a lie, and it resulted in the poisoning of the entire planet. And in the United States, the seriousness of the disease was hidden and downplayed by the administration, and it was given almost 3 months of a head start before the fact of its deadliness was taken seriously. The lie of hiding the truth resulted in a much worse and deadly situation in the United States. Today, because of that delay, the United States has one of the highest numbers of deaths per capita from the pandemic in the entire planet. Truth was hidden and dishonesty was on the stage. Yet in the midst of this fact, a significant number of American citizens to this day refuse to believe that the pandemic exists. They refuse to wear masks. They refuse to physically distance, refuse to wash their hands regularly, and they refuse to get vaccinated. The truth of the pandemic is opposed by the falsehood that it does not exist. Diabolos, division, is alive and extends our pandemic. It extends our birth pains. It causes death. Our country is in the birth process, and it is painful, of debating the good and the bad of admitting persons from other countries to this United States of America and allowing them to live, to work, to become citizens, and to travel back and forth between this country and their homelands. Anyone who has studied the very least amount of a history of our country knows that it is formed today from persons from almost every country on the entire planet. Our citizenry is truly e pluribus unum, one from many. Our very strength and success has been born of the minds and works of immigrants and their descendants. Our world of arts is populated vastly by persons from other countries and their descendants. Yet here and again, there is a significant number of persons, the haves, whose very ancestors came to this country from other lands, who wish to close our borders, seal off the country from the outside, from the have-nots, erecting a physical border that is as impenetrable as parts of the border between the United States and its neighboring Mexico. Yet we know of an immigrant to this country that no wall has been able to stop, and it is called the COVID-19 pandemic. Should that alone not teach us that borders are not the answer to the world's problems today? We are in a birthing process and a pain of two visions, the vision of exclusion of people and the vision of inclusion of people. Each of these pains of birth we experience in the United States, and many of which are perhaps experienced in Costa Rica today, are pains coming from our current struggle with truth. Living in truth has always been a challenge because the truth hurts as well as heals. Truth hurts when we have to face harsh realities such as hunger, sickness, lack of shelter, poverty, ignorance, discrimination, injustice. Facing these ever-present realities, though, is so much better than ignoring them. There is a saying that we have heard so often that ignorance is bliss. I have a degree of happiness when I do not face reality. I go about life ignoring the wrongs that have permeated our lives as long as they do not affect me. If anything, the United States is in better moral health today because it is coming to grips with the harsh realities of life and making a very honest attempt to address them and repair them, to bring them into truth. We are experiencing in the United States a massive debate on the truth of the news and information that is broadcasted on television, radio, and on the internet. Citizens align themselves with platforms that are considered right-wing, and others align themselves with platforms that are considered left-wing. Fake news is a term used constantly by both sides when what is broadcasted is opposed to their personal beliefs. This mistrust of the media has had a profound effect on what is considered true and what is considered false, and it has divided us further from one another. You have seen on our news in the United States for the past year broadcasts of street riots in many large urban areas of the United States over discrimination against people of color. You saw January 6th, the insurrection and invasion of our nation's Capitol building. You witnessed a very bitter political contest and election over the past year. You heard the former president proclaim in his inauguration speech that America would be first. You witnessed the abandoning of climate agreements, trade agreements, nuclear disarmament agreements, harsh words spoken by the president about persons who had disagreed with him. Now you hear the current president making bold moves to bring the United States back to the world table in trade, climate, nuclear disarmament, peaceful negotiation, respectful language towards those who disagree with him. You still hear his very vocal opponents with threats of violence toward members of his party and of the administration. A recent speaker and future candidate for the Senate in the state of Montana said last week that his election would help the cause of bringing Washington to its knees. The diabolical, the divisionary words, the rhetoric continues its untruthful march throughout the country, still suffering the terrible scourge of the pandemic. The pain of birth and delivery continues in our nation, yet we still hope for a live birth, a birth of truth, of justice, of equality, of a world without borders. Fifth, there's an often told story of a boy playing neighborhood baseball. He is playing the field. A man walking alongside the field on the sidewalk asks the lad, "What's the score?" The boy, without a trace of humiliation, says, 17-0, their favor. The man asks him, "Son, aren't you discouraged?" The boy remarks, "No, sir. We haven't even gotten to bat yet." Perhaps our nation in the United States is in a similar condition. We have so far to go to achieve true brotherhood and sisterhood in this country. The child of truth and fairness and equality and justice is still in the birth channel, and thus the pain is still present. But I feel the child is moving down the birth channel and will enter the world alive. Efforts are underway to make our world freer and less bound by the unnecessary borders of elitism, racism, sexism, ethnocentrism, and nationalism. Each of us can make these borders less prominent by simple kindness to persons, by paying just wages, learning another language, by discussing, by studying, by thanking persons who do big and little things for us, by being peaceful and loving members of our families, by making music, by painting, by dancing, by building, by singing, by reading, by praying, by playing sports, by cleaning up our local environments, by paying attention to the news, by paying our taxes, by kindness to the people with whom we live and work, by being faithful marriage partners, by writing to our legislators, by voting, by paying our bills, by giving a just day's work wherever we are employed, by keeping our messaging kind and honest, by telling the truth in all circumstances, by supporting our local food pantries, by taking care of our own relatives and neighbors, by giving away our surplus funds to worthy causes, by challenging respectfully persons who confront us with lies and untruths. These are not uniquely American or Costa Rican ideals. These are universal ideals. They are achievable. This very colloquium this week at Universidad de ULaSalle is just such a concrete move towards the truth, towards removing borders, towards unity. Our country is in reality the world. Yes, we are legal citizens of our respective nations where we live and work and vote. But our real country is the world. The pandemic has shown us in a deadly way that the entire world is in this together. It has no border. The United States can and should distribute its COVID vaccines all over the planet. What a wonderful sign that the United States has abandoned the border concept of America first and has embraced the entire world, that it has erased the outmoded concept of borders, just as the European Union is an effort to erase the outmoded concept of borders on that continent. Sharing is so much better than hoarding. National Public Radio, January 18th, when our nation observed the anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther King Jr., solicited for the occasion poetry from its listeners that started with the opening lines of African-American poet Langston Hughes, which began, "I dream a world where..." I submitted lines to the program. Though my lines submitted were among 2,000 or other submissions, and my lines did not make the cut, may I repeat them here to close this reflection. I dream a world where serving is overcoming mastering, where helping is overcoming hurting, where knowing is overcoming ignoring, where caring is overcoming enriching, where teaching is overcoming domineering, where listening is overcoming talking, where nurturing is overcoming demeaning, where reverencing is overcoming denigrating, where incorporating is overcoming discriminating, where loving is coming over to all. Embracing is so much better than bordering. Serving is so much better than mastering. Loving is so much better. Somos Baptista de la Salle, ruega por nosotros. Vive Jesús en nuestros corazones por siempre. Thank you.
Thank you so much, brother. So your lecture has been very, very interesting, and well, actually, it has helped us to think about our social situation and also the situation that is taking place around the world. If you have questions, you can write them down here. We can ask him the questions. Actually, I have one, brother. Based on what you have just said, I think that having exchange programs among countries, that, for example, we can take advantage of the old LaSalle universities that we have around the world in order to make other cultures know our own culture and vice versa. Because sometimes we don't understand or we don't tolerate other people because we don't know them, or because, as you said, we don't read, we don't watch news, we are not interested in learning or in knowing what is happening around the world. Do you agree that exchange programs can help us to break those borders, to make them disappear?
I can only allude to my own experience. When I went to Costa Rica, it was the first time I was ever in another country well, it was only a week or two. But when you live with people, you eat with them, you listen to them, you struggle with learning their language, you see the way the children are, the adults, you look at the traffic, the weather, it completely changes the experience. And exchange programs allow that to do that. I do plan, if the COVID reduces, to go myself to Lebanon to be with Brother Matthew. And he said, don't come for a day or so, stay a month. Learn another thing. Just trying to learn Arabic expressions or something. I feel my life is bigger. So when we can have an exchange program that is significant, as the one that we have had for a number of years, with Colegio de ULaSalle. I've known almost to a man, the boys that come down there do not want to come home. My own grandnephew went down there and did not want to come back. He loved it so much down there. His life was changed by that. So an exchange program, when it is possible, that's the best.
Yeah. Brother, there is another question here, and it says, what do you think should be done in the United States to clear this gap? Make people understand that racism and having not universal health care should be addressed.
And so your question deals with the universal health care. As I tried to explain, we still have a number of people here who feel that health care is a privilege and is not a right, but it's a right. Just today, the president of the Congress, it was 50-50 divided to support President Biden's COVID relief, which includes medical help. And it was a 50-50 thing. And the vice president, being in his party, she gave the decisive vote, and the COVID relief plan of $1 trillion, something like that, was passed. Again, there are people who feel that we are putting ourselves into interminable debt. And on the other side, you have people who can't get into hospitals, cannot get medicine, cannot get food, they're unemployed. If we have ever had a crisis, we have it right now. And so I think the Affordable Health Care Act is something, it's 5 or 6 years old now. Give it time to get cleaned up, just as Social Security did and Medicare. Give these programs an opportunity to function so that all people, whether they deserve it or not, all people deserve it, can get into a hospital, can go to a clinic.
That's right. And well, I have another question here. For you, brother, which are the most important values that people should keep in mind and in their hearts to build a world without borders?
Again, I'm not the most truthful person in my lifetime, but if we can be persons of truth, when I face the truth regarding the borders that I have with other people, if I have racism in me, if I have sexism in me, if I have ethnocentrism, where I think my nationality makes me a little bit better, nationalism, elitism, when I face the truth, then it's going to become right to me. I need to care for others. I need to be the border between me. Just with you, Patricia and Avanya and the Barzunas, just the little relationship that I was privileged to get with you, that broke down borders between us. I have an appreciation. Today, a young man named Kareem entered the postulancy, the first stage of formation in the Brothers in Egypt. I've never met him, but I see little things about him on Facebook. Brother Matthew has told me about him. I have become interested in someone thousands of miles away in his life and his future. That border's broken down. I don't think just of American brothers. There are brothers all over the world.
Well, Jonathan Tejada has a question for you, brother. Jonathan, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, my name is Jonathan. I'm from Honduras and now I'm living in Guatemala. So I have a question for you. So what can we do as teachers to prevent the immigrations from our countries to the United States? Because probably they don't going to have an opportunity for a job or to health. So I'm asking this because so many Hondurans now they're going to the United States, but we as people, what can we do? with our students to prevent this in the future?
And so your question is, as a person from another country, you're talking about coming to this country for employment, what you can do as a teacher in, say, Guatemala to encourage people to come to this country? Is that what you're saying?
No. How to avoid?
So that there are many people who have some economic issues in their own countries here in Central America. And as a result or as a solution for them, they decide to immigrate to the United States. And you know that there are like a caravana of the Honduran people who are going through Mexico right now, and they want to go to the United States. What do people do to prevent all this situation?
The current president, Mr. Biden, is undoing a lot of the anti-immigration laws that have been on the books in the recent years so that people can come to this country for asylum, for employment, to visit, and again, you have a significant number of people, particularly near borders. They do not want people to come into the city because they say they take the work. But yet, for example, the work done by Mexican immigrants in our country is so skilled so often. The labor that they do, they're doing work that Americans don't want to do. Why can we not allow them to come in with visas, do work, pay taxes, visit their families, in a sense, be as legal persons? That's what we have to do, so that, as our questioner tonight says, if he's teaching in Guatemala and has a student who would like to come to the United States to study, to work, if we can reduce these borders to make that possible, then I think we become a land of justice. We're not hurt. Our country has been helped by people coming from all across the globe to make this country. Locking out Guatemalans from us is not the answer. Now, this is my personal opinion, and I think as I get older, I understand more the importance of being open to people, let them coming in. And if you're a teacher in Guatemala, you can assist that student with teaching the student how to use the internet, how to find legal ways, normal ways to get into the country, encouraging as much as possible. Still remain honest with the person. It is difficult right now. Hopefully the day is coming that we can be open again. We can be e pluribus unum once again.
Julio Chavarria has another question for you. Go ahead.
Yes, I would like to know which was the most impacting situation during your trip to Costa Rica. What made you open, or your mind to open to this type of thinking about having no borders? And also, what are your thoughts regarding new generations that are more open to this kind of experiences in any of the topics you already talked about racism, about the sex definition and all of that stuff? How do you foresee the future with the new generations?
Thank you so much. It's little things meant so much to me. I loved watching the children. I've taught secondary school, colegio, all of my life. I've not taught in the elementary, the primero. I loved watching the children learn how to dance during the day. It was a freeing experience. I enjoyed watching the high school students. As I said about Patricia, who taught English to those students, I would marvel at the fact that I could speak to them in English and they just carried on conversation. that really, it kind of pierced me a little bit to realize I was not as functional in Spanish as they were in English. That was an important thing. I liked watching this. The school was much more relaxed in nature, and yet work was going on. They took little breaks. That was something I was not used to. I've taught in a boys' school for years, and we're a little bit stricter. But the friendliness of the people, I was surprised. It was a different environment. The property of people is bounded by fences and gates and walls. Was not used to that. That was a new experience. I can understand the reasons for it, perhaps, but that was something. And again, the brothers that I lived with seemed to be so much more universally interested than our American brothers that we tend to think only this country, but Brother Moises and Brother Abdon, all the different brothers that were there showed to me a universal experience. The cook at the brothers community, Adela, is from another country and cannot visit her own native country. That stunned me. Cannot go visit her mother. Those were experiences that I had in Costa Rica. The beauty of the country is stunning, and also they told us when we were in the country, don't put your hands anywhere; something will bite you. But I learned from the people in Costa Rica an openness that I had not experienced and interested in other people, and a kindness and a simplicity that meant an awful lot. When I attended the liturgy with the Barzuna family, I felt a special presence of Christ, not only in the family, but in the liturgy that I had not always experienced. So those were, they were graces. They gave me a new kind of life, and I will always be appreciative of that.
Yes, that is because LaSalle High School, I don't know, maybe if you understand what he is telling us, because we are at the university right now, and many of them didn't study in LaSalle High School. That is that LaSalle High School has an exchange program, or has had an exchange program with Christian Brothers High School in Memphis, Tennessee, for 6 years. And that's why, so we have been like in contact for many years. And so he talks about the Barsunas family, and that is because that is the family that we had in the high school. And one of the children of the family visited Memphis, and he visited the family here. So that is part of that is a good way of opening the borders, of breaking the borders we have. Because if we visit each other in a simple way, as the brother says, so we have a better understanding of how the other culture is. Because we don't visit just touristic place, we go to where the native speakers live, the native people, the people who live in the country live, and we are part of their culture, we are part of their routine, and we know how they live, and we know that they have the same problems, that we know that they love the same things that we do. And so those things make us feel closer to each other. And so I respect their culture, and I'm sure that they respect our culture. And I always say there is no culture better than the other. The cultures are different, and we need to understand.
Sure. When we would be at the airport, when people came and when they left, the joy when they came, but also when they left, the sadness of those students to separate from one another told me that this had affected their heart. This affected their lives. When they were even boys were tearful, and also students of ours have stayed in constant contact with the boys and girls in Costa Rica. That shows their life is different. Their life is better. when you miss people, when your heart hurts, when you miss people, when you leave them, then you know you've been successful. And those of you who are in education, you will know you're successful when your students write to you, they stay in touch with you, that they want to be with you. You will have people, as I have been blessed over 52 years of teaching. I have students now who are grandparents, and I still call them boys. But the fact that they want to stay in touch, then you've touched their lives. The profession of teaching is such a blessed profession because you are entering the heart of those people, not just their mind, but their heart. And that breaks borders. That breaks borders. I lost a student 3 days ago from COVID. He's 59 years of age. My heart hurts over that. That tells me I was able to have an influence on his life. And his close friend called me from Memphis to tell me of his going to heaven. Then you know you've done something. The border is erased. You put your heart with that person.
Julio has another question.
Yes, yes. Sorry,
Mhm.
sorry.
Mhm.
I think Mr. McGraw missed the second part of my question, which was, well, first of all, thank you very much for your words regarding my country, because I really enjoy when someone from another country appreciates how well we received the people here. And the second part of my question was, how do you foresee the future with the new generations, that they have this very open mind, which I think is well, but there can be some issues, because being so open can have its bad things, I think. So what are your thoughts regarding this?
Thank you. When I taught a subject that was called ethics in my former school, ethics was we taught religion to students who were Roman Catholic, and we taught ethics to the other students so that we would not impose our religious faith upon them. They were so frank, so honest about their beliefs, and so open. When I started teaching in 1967, I never felt the openness to diversity that I have felt now. Persons of your generation are so much more open to different lifestyles, different ways of living. I find that the racism, the sexism, the elitism, the discrimination, the nationalism is so much less now than it was when I started in earlier years. Persons of your generations don't have the borders between one another. If this person is this way, this person is that way, you almost appreciate the diversity. Diversity is a virtue for you. In times past, it was considered a vice, but the diversity is a virtue. That doesn't take away all the problems. You still have parents who are, if you're going to have a different way of marriage or a way of living, different faith, it's going to be rough. But the fact that persons of your generation don't have these artificial boundaries and borders has taught me an awful lot. It's been a challenge to me, but it has taught me an awful lot that I think persons, again, who are considered youth today, they have a better vision of the world. They don't have these artificial borders that so often was in our past life. And I think that is a better approach than being very strict, my way or the highway. Just as, again, with our former president, America first, that was a poisonous attitude. We're the world. We're the world. We are not just Costa Rica. We're not just the United States. We're the world. Life is so much better, I think, when we have this relationship with other. And again, I go back to the airport when these groups of students who had just known one another a mere 4 weeks, their hearts were together. They had learned this is the way to live, even though they hurt. Love hurts. You love another person and you have to separate. It hurts, but you're a better person because of it. Thank you, sir.
No, thank you. Lovely words. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you. And maybe Mr. Alfaro, do you have any question for the brother?
Not a question, but I want to give thanks for your contribution to our Transversalization Week. I think that this is an opportunity for us to share with you and to open the floor for different participations in our university. Thanks a lot for your contribution.
No more questions?
They're-
Okay.
They're ready for supper.
Maybe. Thank you, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us, for taking part time, because you are taking other courses, and so you took your time to share it with us. Thank you very much.
There is a question from Marianela Ronda.
I don't see. Okay, Marianela, I'm sorry, I don't see you.
Excuse me. I just
Oh,
want.
Maria Fernandez has
Yes.
one question.
It's not a
Name is
question.
so beautiful, Mariela.
It's not a question. It's just a comment. I want to let Brother McGraw how much I appreciate his comment about immigrant people. Sorry. Has a one. I live in Dallas, Texas. I understand how difficult it is that people judge you just because you are not from here. People that think that you just want to take advantage of government, or you just want any kind of benefit. I work like a legal assistant in a immigration law firm, and I assure you that there's a lot of people that come hoping to find a home, security, a decent job, and try to study to be something like be better people. And yes, I understand that there's bad people out there. It doesn't matter from where, but there's also many more good people trying to being good citizens and trying to contribute in a good way in this country. So what we need to do is stop reproducing hate speech or racism comments, and stop thinking that just because it's an immigrant, it's a bad thing, or it's something bad for the country. So I appreciate the way you put it, the way you express yourself about justice, about everything that is happening in the country right now. And thank you for all your work.
Mariela, when you know someone from another country or something, you're changed by that person. It's no longer a country. It's part of your experience. You're a better person because of it. It's harder to be mean to people that you know. They talk about people who have herds of animals that they eventually slaughter. They say never give names to them because you can't kill a chicken that you named. Well, when you know a person and from another country, you can't hurt that person as well because your heart's involved with that person. That's what you're saying. When the heart is involved, you're going to be a better person. You just can't be mean to that person.
Brother, thank you very much. Thank you.
As the Pope says, have a good supper.
Thank you for being with us again, once more. And
God bless you.
I hope that you can be with us in any other opportunity.
And what you have afforded me an opportunity of a lifetime to speak with you tonight. I will never forget this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you.
You have a nice day.
And thank you, you all who were here in this lecture, because so for me it was very, very interesting, and so it was like a way to continue believing that we need to continue fighting in favor of breaking the borders, right? Good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend. Thank
Have
you.
a great